add shout outs, help wanted, anything to the section, go ahead and add that now. All right, let's kick this away. Hi, everyone. My name is Paris. I am a co-chair of Sig Contributor Experience. Today is April 19th. This is the Thursday edition of Kubernetes community meeting. We do have a full schedule today of demo, release updates. We have an interesting graph of the week, which is our YouTube channel stats from George. We have the Sig CLI update, an AWS update, and a GCP update. And then we also have our announcement section. So first up today, we have Matt with Scaffold. And just a quick reminder that we are recording. So if you do have something to say, just go ahead and raise your hand and I'll try to pick it up or ask in the Zoom chat. All right, you want to take it away, Scaffold?
Sure. So, hey guys, I just posted the link to the repo in the chat so you guys could take a look at it while I'm talking. But I am Matt. I am a software engineer here at Google on the Container Tools team. And I will be demoing some Scaffold today. First, I'll talk a little bit about it. Can everyone see my screen all right? Good. So Scaffold, if you guys haven't heard of it, is basically it's both a tool for developing your apps on top of Kubernetes, but also kind of a giving you a way to shift into CI/CD, or a very basic version of it. So Scaffold has two kind of the CLI basically looks like. You have Scaffold dev and Scaffold run are kind of the two main commands. Run basically runs a build and deploy pipeline once. So that's useful for something like running it inside Google Cloud Builder or running it as part of a Spinnaker step or Jenkins step. Scaffold dev does a build and deploy, but also watches the dependencies of your Docker file or whatever kind of artifact you're building. Scaffold actually supports building things in a few different ways. One of the kind of main ideas behind Scaffold is pluggability. So that means that it's pluggable in the sense of builders and deployers. So an example of pluggable builders would be building your Docker images with Bazel instead of Docker. And an example of a kind of a pluggable deployer is deploying with Helm instead of kube control. So let me just dive into the getting started demo. So you start off with, here I'm just in the Scaffold repo in the getting started example. I have a very basic Go program that just prints hello world every second. I'm deploying it just in a very simple pod. There's no restriction on resources you can deploy with Scaffold. And then here's just a very basic multi-stage Docker file. Here is the Scaffold YAML. The kind of interesting part here is that there are two stanzas build, which is saying it takes a list of artifacts that we're building. We're building the Scaffold example. And in this workspace is a Docker file, so you don't need to specify anything else. And then we're deploying any manifests that have the case prefix, which is just this file. So if I run Scaffold dev in this will be pretty quick. So I'm using Minikube right now, and I've ran this before, so all the images are cached. But there's no restriction on the clusters you can use with Scaffold. So I'm just going to go ahead and change this. That'll trigger another rebuild and redeploy. And you could see that it had 2 exclamation points here, and now we're streaming logs from the redeployed getting started container. And that's pretty quick because we're doing this all locally. If I wanted to, I could do something like, so this is the GKE cluster now. So as part of this flow, it'll actually push the image instead of just load into the Docker daemon. So I could do something like this. This will take slightly longer. I mean, this is a very minimal image, so it's not that crazy. But you could see that it's deployed now, and if I make a change, basically the same thing will happen, but remotely. So that's nice for switching between. We want to support workflows that are both local and kind of remote, with kind of minimal overhead. I'm not going to let this complete. I'll just move on to another quick example. I'll go back to Minikube here. One cool feature we added, and this is, not to say that this is like the best way to build images, but it's kind of a proof of concept of non-Docker file builds. We have a Bazel build here, so it's using the rules Docker repository and rules to build a Go image here. So this is basically going to be a very similar example, except there's no Docker file in this folder, and it will build with Bazel. So if I go here, do a scaffold dev, this will also be pretty quick because it's already been built and cached. But you can see that it's a very similar flow here. And so the idea is that we'll support more ways to do this sort of thing. It doesn't have to be Bazel, it doesn't have to be Docker, but Scaffold should support all of those things. Another kind of nice thing about Scaffold is here I have, this is the microservices example. Here we actually have a Scaffold YAML with 2 images and 2 deployments. So the idea is that a lot of times your development environment is not just one-to-one with image to dev tool. Most likely you're deploying multiple projects. You're developing on multiple images at once that all depend on each other. So the relationship here is that I'll just pop into these are also very basic apps. Leroy Web is just kind of a front end that calls Leroy app, and Leroy app just prints Leroy app. So how this would work is, and Scaffold's smart enough to do kind of conditional rebuilding, so it knows what artifacts you've changed and which ones need to be redeployed. So this one's a little different because I haven't actually exposed anything. Let's see. So if I hit the Leroy Web endpoint, I'll get Leroy app here. So if I change this Leroy app code, it should trigger the rebuild here. And this will rebuild the worker. And then I should be able to hit this endpoint and get the kind of new, might take a little longer to deploy. My laptop is heating up with all these services, Minikube and Zoom, so possible. But okay, there we go. So the idea is that you can use this to develop with kind of multiple services and multiple apps. And there's still a lot of work we need to do with that, but the framework is there. Another thing I'd like to mention is that if you guys saw the link to the actual repo, you'll notice that it's under Google Container Tools, which is a new repository that our team has been moving a lot of projects into. So it includes things like Scaffold, distro list, which is kind of the Bazel rules that I showed here, and the new project Conoco, which we open sourced a few days ago for unclustered builds. And there'll be Conoco support in Scaffold very shortly. I've been working on that. But the idea is that we want to support tools like that. We want to support tools like Image and Builda, and because I think in the future your development environment is going to look a little different, and you're going to want to use these tools that have the faster dev loop than just a simple Docker build. Yeah, that's pretty much all I got. I could take questions, or if we don't have any time.
We have some time for questions. Any questions? Feel free to post them in chat too if you'd rather not do it live.
Hey, I have a question. What's your plan around integration with the main Kubernetes community CI? Or maybe what's the state of it at the moment? So as new Kubernetes versions are coming out, how's your kind of qualification testing working for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Right now we're pinned to 110. We just kind of, the project was released a few weeks into March, so it's fairly new. So we have integration test coverage for all of our current examples, but we don't have any kind of version SKU testing yet. But I think going forward, we'd probably like to stick with, the kind of Kubernetes, 2 versions ahead or 2 versions behind promise. I think that would be a reasonable thing for Scaffold. If that answers your question.
In part, I mean, I guess part of the, there's another rat hole to ask about here, which is why not just have it as part of Kubernetes itself?
The tool?
Or should it be a CNCF project, or like, how are you thinking about the future of this in an ecosystem is maybe the broader question, but we may also not have time for that, so.
Yeah, I mean, that's also a great question. I mean, we're trying to keep it as unopinionated as possible. For now, there's really no ties to, I mean, we do have Google Cloud Builder support, but we're not designing it, essentially with, it being tied to GCP or a certain cloud or anything like that. So, maybe in the future, if people feel like it would be better as a community project, I think we would be open to that, but there's no plans right now.
Yeah, Bob, this is Matt Farina. Real quick, I can jump on this a little bit. Was a number of discussions on this in places like the mailing list and other places, and developer level projects like this in the ecosystem where people are expecting there to be an explosion of tools and competitors, just like there are competitors to Scaffold today, is to live in the ecosystem, and Kubernetes doesn't want to take on the management of those as a project or to even be opinionated on saying which ones to choose. That's kind of one of the things that the steering committee has communicated as a goal here, kind of let these ecosystem things be in the ecosystem. One of the nice things is because they all have to talk to the Kubernetes API, it's API versioning. And so that means it's not as painful as being directly linked because it talks to the public API the way other tools do.
Take one. Sorry, go ahead. Bob, did that help?
Thank you very much.
There's one more question, and then we're going to move on to release stuff. It's from Brad in chat. What are the non-Docker image formats that this tool supports?
Yeah, so right now it only supports Bazel. We are working on JIB support, which is kind of similar, but for Java. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but I'll post a link to that in the chat. We kind of have the infrastructure now to support arbitrary formats to some degree. The only requirements for adding it is that you need a way to query whatever file for its dependencies. So for Bazel, we can do something like a Bazel query on the build file to understand what the source code dependencies are. And for a Docker file, we actually do some parsing of the Docker file for adds and copies to figure out what your real source code dependencies are. But other than that, implementation of other builders should be pretty easy. And we're accepting those in tree right now. But if it gets to a point where we have so many, we might move to something like a plugin model or a community model.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Matt. And then now we are going to move on to the 1.11 release updates. Josh, the release lead, want to take it away?
Yep. We have, scroll down. So first of all, most important thing, feature freeze is this upcoming Tuesday. So please file issues for your expected features in the features repo. Make sure that any features your SIG is working on and thinks you're going to complete in the 1.11 timeframe are represented there. Second of all, Currently, our test status for 111 for master is not looking really good. The AISH actually put out the CI signal report, which is linked from the notes here. Also out in Kubernetes Dev. We'll be issuing those every week and then more frequently as we get towards code freeze. We're basically about a third of the blocker jobs are failing and about 2/3 of the upgrade, actually more than that, like 90% of the upgrade jobs are failing. The CI signal has opened issues for all of the failing tests, which various people's SIGs should have been CC'd on. Please take a look at those. I'll remind everybody, per last week's discussion, our plan to shorten code freeze and give everybody more time to develop on Kubernetes is really dependent on getting clean signal. And for that matter, ultimately, releasing on time is dependent on getting clean signal. So if we can fix those test failures now, things will be worlds easier as we get towards the release. Speaking of release, Caleb is putting out a 111 Alpha 2 today. Given the number of failing tests, that is not expected to be working alpha. Mainly we're doing this actually just to exercise the release scripts, etc., and make sure that they're all working for 111. Also, later today, the release notes document, the empty release notes document, which we call a draft, will be up. Watch Kubernetes Dev. Obviously, everybody drops their release notes into their issues. Don't let that prevent you from adding appropriate stuff to the release notes doc by PR. And that is it for 111 for this week.
Any patch release updates? No worries if not. All right. Okay, we'll move on. And then the next is a awesome data stat of the week, which is our YouTube channel stats. George? George, if you're talking, you're on mute.
Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So if you were to guess what the most popular video we have on our YouTube channel, you would think it's this illustrated children's guide to Kubernetes. But when you actually look at the math, it's actually Linux kernel development by Greg Crow-Hartman, which is a video that was put on there a very long time ago and is very popular now and absolutely crushes any other video that the Kubernetes community has ever put out. So I'm George. I kind of help curate a lot of the YouTube channel things like that. And what we do put on our YouTube channel is meetings like this. And we also have an archive from all the SIG leads who record their meetings, and they put them on the channel as well. We have about 7,000 subscribers, and it continues to grow. So we have a full stack of analytics for the channel. So I wanted to just share a few that I feel are interesting and enable us to use YouTube a little bit better. So here are the list of our more popular videos. I think one thing you'll notice as I've gone through this, the more popular videos are the ones that either have been around a really long time or are very descriptive or generic, this is what Kubernetes is, or the ones that expect high user engagement during a stream, like say in office hours or meter contributors and stuff. Unfortunately, most of the SIG meetings and things like that that you expect don't really have like a long tail of a lot of views, right? It might be the person who missed a meeting and wants to catch up. And that's fine. I think mostly those are there to help with our transparency than they are to actually generate page views. So we have some interesting stats here. Most of these are generally trending up. I'm not really going to show you some specifics, but the ones that I really watch for are watch time in minutes. This is basically how sticky a video is. So if someone goes to and they want to see something about Kubernetes and they're only around for 30 seconds, they probably decided not to bother. So we do look at these. We have a generous amount of stats. that we can look on each video. The average view duration is about 4 minutes and 45 seconds, or 43 seconds, which feels about right with attention spans. One thing I did notice, so I don't know if this is a result of how they gather the information, but apparently we have 0.0 females watching our videos ever. So I don't know what's up with this. If anyone has any insight on why that is, or if guessing demographics in browsers is still like a black art or something like that. What did I want to show with this one? Oh, this is where people are coming from. So the majority of these come from YouTube itself and YouTube search. So leads or tech leads, if you're putting your videos on YouTube, it behooves you to put descriptive things into the description that help it get found in YouTube. So in our channels, I almost always put a Kubernetes and a cloud native tag on there. So I encourage you to put the links to your notes, maybe a little description of what you talked about or whatever. Something, if it's something specific that you know people might be interested in, feel free to put that in description. That will help people find the video easier. I thought devices was interesting. I was expecting mobile to crush everything else, but I guess we're all just a bunch of nerds that sit on our computers and actually watch Kubernetes videos. I also thought it was interesting that people watch this on TVs and TV devices more than they do on tablets. So that's how I watch. That's usually how I watch the videos, like during a lunch or something. I'll plop on a steering committee video or something. A pro tip: when you are catching up on the videos, you can watch videos on YouTube at 1.5 speed, which really helps you catch up. That's a pro tip from Joe. And the last bit is we do live streams. Normally we live stream this meeting, but I had technical issues. So what you see here is when we do something like an office hours where we're expecting the users to interact with us, we do get about 40 concurrent people at one point. The difficult things with doing things like live streams and meet our contributors is they start off pretty slow because it takes time for people, to eventually check their phone, and the thing they're subscribed to gives them hey, the thing that you care about is streaming, and then they have to find a place to sit down and stuff. So I'm starting to think about whether it might be worth extending these out a little bit more to try to kind of grab more of the audience. So with that, unless anybody has any questions, that's pretty much it. And I'm planning on sharing these stats, people, at least once a year to kind of show you how things are going. So.
Very cool. I think the data that suggests the computer is the most used matches the Kubernetes.io analytics as well. Very cool. All right. Next is Sig Updates. CLI, are you on?
Yep, this is Maciej.
All right. Hey, how are you?
Hey, pretty good. Pretty good.
Kick it off.
So from the Sig CLI front, there are two significant updates that I would like to discuss. One is something that will be a user-facing, which is the server-side print. So over the past couple of releases, along with the Sig API machinery, we worked on unifying this and moving the printing of objects to the server so that any consumer of the Kubernetes API has the exact same output when printing objects. So this feature is currently in beta, and in 1.10, we enabled users to opt in for this feature in kubectl. Currently, if you do kubectl get, the output that you're getting is actually the one presented by the server. There is an option to opt out of this functionality. There's a server print flag that you just need to turn to false, and in this case, you will fall back to the previous functionality, but it is on by default in 1.11, and that's, yeah. From a regular user point of view, there should not be any differences between the output before and currently. If you notice any problems, any issues, let the Sig CLI know, and we would like to fix it as soon as possible because we really care that this is the direction that we would like to get this thing going. The other thing that I wanted to discuss is that we're working hard on refactoring the majority of the commands inside of kubectl. So this is more towards all of the developers of Kubernetes, and especially all the commands developers within the kubectl, is that we had many different patterns across the entire kubectl repository, and we're trying to unify by introducing printing flags so that every single command has a identical set of flags, and based on the flags, the output of the command is always the same. So no matter if you're doing get, if you're doing create, if you're doing apply, or any other command, given that you're providing the same input flags, the output will be the same. And this is one approach, and we're trying to unify the entire flag handling business within the kubectl with the hope that, first of all, this will help to unify the code base. This will additionally unify the user experience, and most importantly, will simplify the code base. That's pretty much it.
Awesome. Does anybody have any questions? All right. AWS, you are queued up. Justin, you on?
I am. Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. So I'm going to be giving the Sig AWS update. But for people that don't know, I actually joined Google as of about 2 weeks ago. So I am now a Googler, but I'm still involved in Sig AWS, at least from the technical point of view. But in general, in Sig AWS, we're sort of doing the normal support for new AWS features like NVMe and NLB as they come out on AWS. And so a shout out to Micah Hausler, who's been doing almost all the work on NLB, which is wonderful to see. But what I really wanted to sort of call attention to was the Sig repositories work that's happening. And in general, in Kubernetes, there's a move to do more and more outside of the Kubernetes repository. And eventually that will culminate in the AWS cloud provider itself being moved out of tree, like all cloud providers, into the Cloud Controller Manager. Though that is not imminent, I will say, for AWS, hopefully soon, but not imminent. And one of the big blockers is sort of the non-technical issues about what a release looks like and how we put that together and how we test it. And also there's still a ton of demand for other features that we don't really want to pile into core. And the steering committee recently defined a new type of repository called a Sig repository, which is still, I guess, part of Kubernetes and hosted by a Sig. And it lives in the github.com/Kubernetes SIGs.org. And so the great news is that we have our first project spinning up in that GitHub org, Kubernetes SIGs AWS Encryption Provider, and that implements the API server support for encryption at rest inside of etcd. That actually has a sort of interesting history in that there was originally an implementation in tree for Google Cloud Platform backed by Google's KMS. When we realized that, of course, that would be putting more and more into the main repo, the decision was made to pull that out of the Kubernetes repo and instead have a gRPC interface instead. And so our first SIG repository project is to implement that gRPC interface for Amazon AWS. So it's great in that it's our first project that is out of tree and builds stuff out of tree, and hopefully will be a core part of the release that everyone will run in 1.12 or maybe 1.11, but probably by 1.12. And I'd like to give a huge shout out to Seth Pollock, who's really doing all the work on that, including wiring up into E2E. So thanks a lot for Seth. And so I think that's sort of an exciting avenue for SIG AWS and for Kubernetes. And I hope we'll see a lot more activity outside of Kubernetes in the new SIG repositories avenue. There's a ton of stuff we wanted to do in the past. Heptio has an AWS identity project, which we'd love to see, go through that process. And there's also a generally huge backlog of things that we want to tackle that might have been a little bit more controversial than that particular implementation. And so a call to anyone that wants to help out. There's a ton of work, and we now have an opportunity a place to do it all. So come and help out with SIG AWS. It looks like I have a correction from Micah.
Yes, well, yeah, we actually had a kind of ad hoc meeting around the AWS cloud provider to get that broken out. So that is happening.
great news. We still have to figure out the non-technical issues, so yes, but it would be great to see. Yeah, hopefully we can all figure them out together.
All right. And the steering committee does record their meetings for anyone that's interested in seeing what they're up to. Last question, any last questions for Justin or the AWS crew? All right. Next up is the GCP crowd. Adam, are you on? Adam?
Sorry. Yes. Hello.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm speaking on behalf of Sig GCP, which is the kind of Google Cloud Platform oriented SIG. I guess if I have one single report for this, it's that the Sig GCP is not thriving. We've had 3 meetings total in over 3 or 4 months. And we've had a real lack of topics to talk about, inbound requests for people to present, or inbound requests for topics to be discussed, questions to be answered. So we've had a pretty tough time filling that out. Part of that is probably the fact that there's only one lead for the group, which is me. I haven't done an awesome job of trying to gather everything together or find a co-lead. More recently, we've had someone volunteer to try and be a co-lead for this, which is great news. So I'm going to try and pursue that and maybe get a bit more material together. I think it kind of suffers a little in that SIG GCP feels very organizationally appropriate. You need a SIG to own the kind of, in the cloud provider context, certain parts of the code base that obviously relate to GCP. It's appropriate for topics to be thrown out there. So everybody would agree it makes sense, but nobody actually is kind of interested or sees it, has problems that it would solve, I guess, has discussions that they need to bring there. The people working on GCP related matters are busy doing that, mostly in Google or in the Kubernetes team here. There's been quite a few people interested in lurking and interested in what might be happening in GCP. But like I said, there's been, I haven't had a lot of luck in forging a community around it. So I guess if I'd use this little slot with the wider community to encourage people, if you do have any questions or thoughts, desires related to GCP or information about GCP, please don't hesitate to use the mailing list. I can find speakers for almost any topic if people are interested in that. And I hopefully will have a few more things going forward as well with this new co-lead. And that's pretty much all I've got.
All right. Thank you, Adam. Any questions for Adam? All right. That ends our SIG updates for today. Moving on to the announcement section. First, we like to cover shout outs and thanks to our active contributors, first and foremost, but we also call out specific folks in our shout out Slack channel. So if you see someone doing great things, helping out, especially issue triage and other chopping water, carrying wood roles, this is the opportunity to highlight those folks. First, we have Masik Patel for providing some nuance and clarity around Node Autoscaler, and then Christoph Blecker for fielding so many issues and PRs. Thanks again. Awesome work, everyone. Next section that we have is a help wanted. So if you are in a SIG or in the project and need some help in some fashion, feel free to add your information here. Our one this week is with SIG UI. They're actually looking for active contributors as well, and they're looking to revitalize the dashboard. Please join their communication channels and attend the next meeting to announce your interest in this. Super important. Again, get the word out. SIG UI is looking for active contributors for the dashboard. And then last but not least, KubeCon update, the current contributor track session voting, which happens, the contributor summit happens on May 1st. It's going to be emailed today to attendees. And also please RSVP for the contributor summit. It is separate than KubeCon attendance. And it is free though, so no, it does not cost anything to go to the contributor summit. There will be a new contributor workshop, so this is not closed off to just current contributors, and we'll also do a doc sprint, some SIG updates, hallway track, and some more fun things. Does anyone have any last minute updates that they'd like to share or announcements?
Just real quick, SIG leads, I know everyone's waiting to the last minute, but if you could fill out the spreadsheet that I sent to the SIG leads and dev list as to doing your 5-minute update during the contributor summit, that would make planning a lot easier. Thank you.
All right, last
one
call.
announcement. Yep, one announcement from me. Today I've sent a message to Kubernetes dev about Meet the Maintainers booth that is CNCF organizing for our projects. So specifically for Kubernetes, this call is specifically for Kubernetes community and for Kubernetes project is that please sign up for the booth duty at KubeCon Cloud Native Con in Copenhagen. Please select the best time when can you organize and provide some feedback and have the conversations with the people who can be interested in contributing to Kubernetes or having any other questions. It's not about the contributor summit, just a note. It's during the general track of KubeCon Cloud Native Con.
All right, last call before you get 20+ minutes back. All right, well, that concludes today's edition of Kubernetes Community Meeting. We will see you here same time next week, and then we will take off a week for KubeCon. See you then. Thanks, everyone. Happy Thursday.
Thank you. Thank you.